All right, is everybody ready? Let's call this meeting to order. The October 8th meeting of the Policy Committee meeting is now convened. Madam Secretary, are there any speakers?
There are no speakers this evening.
Well, I mean any public speakers, I'm sorry. With that, the consent agenda,
So
might there
moved.
be a motion? I'll second that. Could we have a question?
Director Gould?
I have a question.
Oh,
You need a
okay, go ahead.
Yeah, we need
What
to
is
call for the
truth?
question. Are we going to pass?
Aye.
And Director Scheidegger.
Aye. Passes.
passes.
Good job. We have an action item. For that, Ms. Thomas, would you please brief us?
Wells. Before the committee for consideration this evening is an accounts receivable collection policy. The proposed policy in many ways is simply formalizing procedures that the district already has in place regarding its billing practices and collections of past due accounts, including recording of receivables in a manner that permits an analysis of how long an account has remained unpaid, providing proper delinquent notices to account holders, and sending receivables aged over 70 days past due to the district's outside collection agency. Finally, the policy also establishes the following thresholds for write-offs and adjustments of amounts owed that are deemed to be uncollectible. So $5,000 and under with the approval of the chief financial officer, $15,000 and under with the approval of the fire chief, and amounts over $15,000 requiring board of directors approval. Staff recommends consideration of the policy and referral of the policy to the full board for its consideration. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Director Gould, do you have any questions?
I absolutely do.
Yes.
Okay, well then we'll move on. Oh, no, please ask your questions.
Does this include also our ambulance billing?
It does. So it covers those accounts. Those accounts, as you know, are not billed directly by the district. We contract with an outside billing agency, but generally the timelines and the policies reflected in this policy also apply to those accounts.
Okay. And how common is it that we have accounts that are greater than 15,000 that we write off?
Not common. So what we're talking about here on write-offs are accounts that rather than sending to the outside collection agency, we would write off because they're deemed to be uncollectible. Really not common at all. The sense that I'm getting is, maybe this happens 4 or 5 times a year. Not very common at all.
4 or 5 times a year to the tune of 15G plus?
No, at all. That we'd write off an account and
Okay,
not send to the outside collection agency. I'm not aware of any
Okay.
that have been over 15,000.
Okay, because I'm not thinking,
I think that stat was any and all, not
Correct.
15 or above.
Correct.
And I think those are de minimis amounts that are, I don't even want to proffer a guess, but I mean, in a matter of, hundreds less.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but I would think that hopefully these $15,000 or even the $10,000 are very rare occurrences that we would then end up writing off. Because I'm trying to think of what examples we would have in this department where we would have a $15,000 bill we would send somebody that's not another governmental agency that used our services or what have you. But it just seems like that's an awful lot of money to just write off.
Correct, and which is why we've established that as requiring board of directors approval. As I said, I'm not aware of any that have risen to that level, and it's very few that any would be written off because generally our practice would be to send it to the collections agency.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And as I understand it, these procedures, including the amounts, are pretty much what we've been following or acting under now.
Correct. The procedures are there were no amounts established
Okay,
previously.
so we're specifying the amounts with this.
Correct.
Okay. And what you're looking for from the policy committee tonight is to pass this on to the full board for acceptance. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, so it requires no action at this point other than our information and acceptance, approval, endorsement, whatever.
And direction to take to the full board.
And take it to the board. Okay,
Correct.
good enough.
It is in fact an action item on the agenda, so we do have to take action.
All right, so we'll have a
So
motion then.
Yes, I'm going to go ahead and make the motion. We adopt staff's recommendation.
I'll second that motion.
Imagine that. I've now
Director
completed
Gould.
my responsibility.
You have to vote.
Well, I didn't.
Director Gould.
Oh, I can't hear that here. Aye.
and Director Scheidegger.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, good. I think that takes up our entire agenda for the night. Our next meeting is tentatively set or firmly set for November 12th. There are agenda items for the 12th, you think? All right, then we're firmly set.
For more than this one, kind of? We'll have more than,
We had attempted to get more than one on tonight's agenda, thus we'll roll them to the 12th.
We might get into two.
can you give us a heads up, Chief, on what we might be looking at as far as a policy we might be dealing with?
Right now, I can't because I'm still waiting for them to come back, so.
Oh, so
but
it's super
we'll do
secret.
it Through the clerk, we'll actually give you a heads up well before the meeting.
Secret stuff, huh?
Well, I think there's a number of them that are in different stages
Percolating.
of ripeness.
Percolating,
Yes.
as they say.
Yes.
All right.
Right?
Very good. With that, thank you all for your attendance and participation. Thank you.
Meeting
We'll
adjourned.
adjourn.
Okay, thank you. We appreciate your attendance this evening on this special meeting of the Sacramento Metropolitan Fire District's Board of Directors for Thursday, October 8th, 2015. I'm calling this meeting to order, and we begin this evening with a pledge to the flag. And I'd ask my colleague, Mr. Wood, if you would please lead us.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Director Wood. Ladies and gentlemen, this open session of our meeting is videotaped for cablecast on Metro Cable 14 to be replayed on Saturday, October 10th, 2015 at a new time at 1 p.m. and Monday, October 12th, 2015 at 6 p.m. on Channel 14. Also webcast at www.sacmetrocable.tv. The open session meeting will also be available for viewing on the district's website at www.metrofire.ca.gov. Madam Clerk, do we have any speaker cards for this evening's special meeting?
There are no speakers this evening.
Thank you very much. I'll now move to consent. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I'll move the consent calendar.
First and a second relative consent before taking a vote. Any questions on consent? Corrections or additions to the minutes of September 24th? Hearing none and seeing none, Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Director Clark? Aye. Scheidegger?
Aye.
Wood?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Barnes?
Aye.
And Gould?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you very much. All right, we'll move on with the agenda this evening. The reason we're here this evening is to interview and appoint a member of the community to the vacancy of Division 1 on our board. And I'd like to thank all of those candidates who have taken the time out of their busy schedules to submit their applications for us to review and interview this evening. What I'd like to do is explain to all of you the process that we will go through relative to this action item. This evening, we will have our candidates come up to the podium, and for 3 minutes, in alpha order by last name, they will provide us with an opening statement, followed by clarification questions by board members on information presented either over the dais or in their materials that they have submitted as part of their application. Each of those continued conversations will last a maximum of 5 minutes. On the pulpit, there is a time clock, which we will see and the candidate will see. So that's 3 minutes for each opening statement and 5 minutes maximum of conversation between board members and the candidate at the time. It is not a time for debate. It is simply a time for questions and comments. We will continue that process until all the candidates have had an opportunity for an opening statement and the 5 minutes of questions and comments by the directors, at which time we will take a 5-minute recess. Once we come back from that recess, I will reiterate the process, and I will ask that each director publicly announce their top 3 candidates to move forward to second round. The board clerk will monitor and record selections from each director. During a short recess, then, the board clerk will tally the votes as described. At that time, I'll reconvene the meeting, and the board clerk will read the names of the top 2 candidates or 3 candidates if there is a tie. At that time, we will then take a 5-minute recess, allowing those candidates moving to the second round to gather their thoughts. At that point, we will reconvene and we will call in reverse alpha order by last name the remaining candidates for second round. At that point, we will then have a 5 to 15-minute question and answer period with open dialogue between board members and each candidate. This is where our board members can ask extemporaneous questions or questions from a bank of questions that we have provided each board member. At the end of the second phase, I will then ask for a nomination for a candidate to fill this role. A nomination will require a second, and then a roll call will follow. There must be 5 votes in favor of that proposed candidate in order to move forward. The first candidate to receive 5 votes will be sworn in by the board clerk to fill the vacancy. As soon as we have that vote taken, where we have a nominated candidate with a second, receives 5 votes through recall, we will then take a 5-minute recess, thank all of the candidates who've participated, and allow us to then prep that new board member for the swearing-in component of that process so that it goes smoothly for the candidate. At that point, I will reconvene the meeting, and we will have an oath of office swearing in for that new board member. After that is completed, I will then continue the meeting as agendized and published today. And so we will then just go right into the business of the special board meeting. So with that long-winded description of how this evening will run, I'd like to begin our first 3-minute presentation by our first candidate to fill the vacancy in Division 1, and that is Mr. Bravo. It's Mr. Bravo in the audience. Mr. Bravo, good evening. If you'd go ahead and join us here at the podium, and we'll start the clock, and I think you can see that there to your left. We'll start with your 3-minute opening statement, sir.
Members of the board, good evening. My name is Jeffrey Scott Bravo, and I am one of the applicants for the vacancy in Division 1 for the Sacramento Metropolitan Fire District's Board of Directors. I'm a husband, father of 6 children, and homeowner in the community of Antelope. I have volunteered in the Antelope community, serving as a coach for the Little League program in the junior division, and I'm currently the junior varsity baseball coach at Antelope High School. I've been employed by CAL FIRE since 1998, having been assigned to contract municipal fire stations, forest fire stations, an air attack base, the Emergency Command Center, and logistics. I'm currently serving as one of the public information education officers for the unit in the Lake, Calusa, Solano, and Yolo County area. My introduction to the fire service was with one of your predecessor agencies, the Sacramento County Fire Protection District, as a fire explorer. I gained valuable tools, skills, and mentorship from the men and women of this agency, including that of then firefighter Wells at Station 31 in Fair Oaks, and then firefighter Maurice Johnson at Station 25 in Antelope, which to this day I've carried with me throughout my career. I've been blessed to work in many different facets of the fire department and learn how they come together to provide the best possible service. It would be an honor to represent my community to an agency that lives up to its mission statement to provide professional and compassionate protection, education, and service to our community. With the anticipated growth in our division, the needs of its citizens will also increase and become more challenging. Based on your core values of integrity, professionalism, teamwork, and service before self, I am qualified and aspire to assume the position of your representative. In service to the citizens, I will do the right thing when nobody is looking, treat others exactly as I would want to be treated, work together to accomplish common tasks and goals, and place the needs of the community over the interests of the individuals. I thank you for your time and your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Bravo. I appreciate that. Members of the board, Mr. Bravo, if you just go ahead and stay there for just a second. You're doing fine. You're doing fine. Now is a time for us as board members to ask you questions relative to your statement as well as the material you provided the board clerk in the application process. So that's what we're going to do now. I failed to say this before you started, but I also want you to know that even though directors may or may not be looking directly at you, these are skilled individuals to hear things and take notes. They've been doing this a while, so they're hearing what you're saying and taking notes, those kind of things. So don't be offended if not everybody's looking straight at you during this experience. And that goes for the rest of the candidates as well. It's not as if we're not listening, but they may be taking notes and looking down as well. So with that, gentlemen at the dais, Mr. Bravo's in front of us. We have a 5-minute clock on. Are there questions that you would like to ask this candidate?
Thank you.
Okay, any down here? Nothing?
Nope.
Okay, Mr. Bravo?
Okay.
Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay. We'll now move on to our next candidate. And by my list, I'm sorry, I have to keep moving between tabs. In my list, we will call to the podium Mr. Roger Mitchell. Mr. Mitchell. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Okay. Opening statement.
Board Chairman Gould, Board of Directors, Chief Wells, staff, men and women of Metro Fire. I've stood before you many times, but I've chose tonight in my opening statement to tell you a few things about me that you might not know. I was born in Davenport, Iowa. My parents moved to the Rio Linda area when I was 6 months old. I've been told I was transported in the back window of a 1937 Chevrolet Coupe. I wish I had that car today. That being said, my father, when I was about 8 years old, became a volunteer fireman in Rio Linda. Of course, then as a young man of 8 years old, I wanted to be a volunteer fireman. And I found out that you had to be 18 years old. But as I grew a little older, I was told, you know, your dad's a volunteer, so we make concessions there. The rules were a little different then, gentlemen, than we find them today. So at the age of 16, the day I turned 16, I got my driver's license at 16. That afternoon, I became a volunteer in Rio Linda. Shortly after that, which would have been 1968, I became a proud professional firefighter in the then Carmichael Fire Protection District. Years as we move on, I moved through the ranks to the captain, and in the years, it was year 2000, I beg your pardon, 1990, I was appointed to the board of directors for the then Rio Linda Alberta Fire District, excuse me. Then as I moved on through that, I was helpful in the reorganization of that fire district to what was known then as the American River Fire Protection District. A lot of work was done as a board member to see that come to fruition. So I've had experience as a board member putting districts together, and I'm very proud of that. As my life moves on through that, comes year 2000, and I retired from the fire service. And since then, I think most of you know where my efforts have lied in my community. I'm proud to tell you that I lead a team of men that are restoring Rio Linda's second ever fire truck. We're working on the station that belongs to you to preserve that, since it was built with World War II War Powers Act money. I think that'll be a great addition once it's completed to the inventory, something this district can be proud of. So with that, gentlemen, it concludes my opening statement, and I am prepared to answer any questions that you might have of me.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. I appreciate that. Gentlemen, same process. We have 5 minutes for open dialogue with this candidate. Any questions from the board? No questions. Mr. Mitchell, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Board of Directors.
Appreciate it. Okay, we're moving right along. Our next candidate for opening statements is Mr. Jim Newcomer. Mr. Newcomer.
Good evening, President Gould, members of the board, Chief Wells. My name's Jim Newcomer. In checking with the district just prior to the deadline for the filing for this position, I found out that there were no candidates applying. So even though I live in Division 2, I put in for this seat. I think that it's important for the board to look at candidates from within the division, but at that point in time, I didn't have any to judge anything against. So when I found out we had some candidates from Division 1, I decided that I would stick this out and see where it would lead. As most of you know, I served for a year on the board as an appointed director by the board. That year, we reorganized the divisions, and Division 4 left the north area, headed to the south area. As far as personal background, I started my fire service career in Citrus Heights Fire District in December of '73, worked through the ranks as a union representative. Prior to that, as a union member on a steering committee, I worked through the mergers with the North Highlands Fire District, Fair Oaks Fire District, Rancho Cordova Fire District, and then our last merger with American River for Sac Metro. Although I live outside the boundaries of Division 1, I'm within about a half a mile, so I'm fairly close. In the fire service, I think it's critical for someone who aspires to be a good leader that they approach things with an open mind. I think that those of you that I worked with saw that in me when I was on the board. Prior to that, I've been able to work well within the ranks of the union. I've been able to work well with fire service administrations, and even took a stint on the outside in the private sector as a labor representative. I also spent time in the private sector as a mid-level manager with motorsports industry. That being said, I don't think I'm going to run out of time. That's about it for me.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Newcomer. Appreciate it. Again, members of the board, a 5-minute opportunity to ask questions of this candidate. Does anyone have any questions? No. Okay, we seem to be on a theme going on here. All right, with Mr. Newcomer now, we'll now move on to Mr. David Pearson. Mr. Pearson, please join us at the dais. Good evening, Mr. Pearson.
Good evening. My name is David Pearson. Thank you, Chairman Gould and Chief Wells and board members. I appreciate your time in allowing me to come up here and kind of sell me a little bit. I was similar to Mr. Newcomer. I had heard that there was not going to be anybody putting in for this position. And as you know, I served for Division 9, District 9 for 4 years previous to this last election. And so having served on the board and knowing what good things the board does, I wanted to be back on it, so I put my name in. I do not live in the district. I think in some ways that's an advantage with this position. It's just a 1-year appointment. That'll give the next election a nice clean slate for those people coming in, and there won't be an incumbent tag on somebody. It'll be open to all that want to apply for that position. So there are some advantages to being outside the district. Also, that my time here on the board and my time with the fire department, I'm a fire captain with the city of Fairfield. I've been a member of the president of the union for a number of years. I'm no longer the president of the union, but I am still active in the union. I've worked a lot with negotiations on both sides. I dealt with negotiations here, and I've dealt with negotiations on being on the other side, on the union side, so I think I can be beneficial there. I served also with the California Special Districts Association, which was a statewide appointed position, and I represented our board on that, and I think I did a good job there. And I'd like to continue with my association with this board, and so I look forward to your vote.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Again, a 5-minute opportunity to ask Mr. Pearson any questions. I'm not seeing anyone. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Pearson. We'll now move on to, I believe it's Jeffrey, is it Stephen or Stephen? Stephen, pleasure to meet you. You'll join us at the podium, please.
Good evening, board members. My name's Jeff Stevens. I've spent 30 years in the fire service, with 27 being full-time, retiring in July of 2011. I lived all my life in District 1 in the Rio Linda area, my father being a fireman with the Rio Linda Fire District for over 30 years before myself. In my years, I've owned small businesses in the Rio Linda area, and I've been heavily involved with organizations like the Rio Linda Little League for many years in District 1. My board experience is with the Sacramento Kings. I was on the advisory board for the Sacramento Kings in 2015, and what that was I was the liaison or the season ticket holders' voice to the management of the Sacramento Kings. And so that was a rewarding experience. Currently, I'm the lead promoter for the North State Modified Series that works in conjunction with Lucas Oil and MAV TV. It's a once-a-month traveling series that airs on MAV TV, and that's what I do for a hobby. Also, I do side work for Regional Builders, Regional Builders is a fire board-up company, and what I do is I'm the liaison between the board-up company and the fire department. If there's things like the fire department would like to see hasp on the doors or thicker plywood, I report back to Regional Builders and just kind of keep a strong working relationship between the fire department and the construction company. The reason I applied for this position, I spent my professional career working for Metro Fire. July 2011 was not only one of the happiest days of my life, but it was also one of the saddest when you realize that the best part of your life was working for an organization. So when this opportunity came up for Board of Director, District 1, I kind of jumped on it for a fact because the best years of my life was with Metro Fire. And I would like to give something back to the organization. So with that, with my understanding of the demographics of the Rio Linda area and the working of the fire service, I think I'd be a good candidate for the position. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate those comments. All right, colleagues, questions for this candidate? Nothing down here. Man, cat's got your tongues or something. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. All right, our next candidate up this evening is, I believe, Michael Wilburn. Sir, good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for being here. We'll hear your 3-minute opening statement.
Okay, President Gould, directors, Chief Wells, I appreciate this opportunity to introduce myself. I wanted to focus my time on 3 topics. One is experiences which may not stand out in my resume, which you've got. Second is to provide some background into my relationship with Sacramento community. And finally, the big question, why am I interested in this position? So with experiences, I've been on the senior leadership board in 4 corporations. As such, I'm intimately familiar with operating strategies, annual budgets, profit and loss statements, capital expenditures, reallocating assets, and succession plans, to name but a few. Let me assure you that I am comfortable making board-level decisions. In addition, I've served as a trustee on each of our company's retirement plans. In all cases, these were 401k-based plans. In all cases, I had fiduciary responsibility for managing the plan's administration and the investment options. In 2 corporations, I was the Chief Labor Relations Officer. In that role, I was the lead negotiator for multiple collective bargaining agreements with the Teamsters Union. I sat on grievance panels, I presented grievances, I participated in mediation when necessary. I understand and I respect the dynamics associated with the union management relationship. Sacramento community, while I was born in Woodland, I was raised in River Park. I attended and graduated from Sac High, Sac City, Sac State. My 4 children also attended Sacramento area schools, and I was the assistant scoutmaster for their scout troop, which if I had a choice between the Teamsters or a 20-mile hike, I'd take the Teamsters. I've lived in homes in Land Park, Fair Oaks, Elk Grove, The Pocket, and for the last 12 years in Alberta, about a half a block from Station 116. With the exception of 2 years in the military, Sacramento has been home to me, and I'm very proud to call Sacramento home. Why the interest in this role? Moving into retirement, I've been looking for opportunities which allow me to blend my HR and senior management experience with my love for the community. I want to contribute in ways that make a difference to the people in this community. When I read the position statement and looked at your website, I was convinced that this position would be a challenge and a wonderful opportunity. It would be an honor serving on the board, and if appointed, I would commit to running in the November 2016 election. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for that opening statement. I'm going to go to my colleagues for any questions that they might have during this 5 minutes of questioning for each candidate. Any questions to my left? Any questions? What? Oh. Questions to my right? Mr. Wilburn, thank you very much for your opening statement. I appreciate that. We'll now move back to the steps that we had previously outlined. At this point, we will take a short 5-minute recess and allow our directors to consider the statements and the material that's been presented to them, at which time when I reconvene the meeting, I will ask them to announce publicly their top 3 candidates for the vacancy that we have, at which time we'll then go back into an immediate short recess to allow some computation to take place, reconvene, and announce. At this time, we'll go into a 5-minute recess. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we'll go ahead and reconvene the meeting. I'd like to just make a quick little announcement before we begin. The fact that there wasn't any questions of any of the candidates from the board should not be interpreted as we haven't spent time looking at the applications. For our television audience, which is vast, it's important that they also understand that we received this material days in advance, and the board members have already gone through this material. It wasn't just delivered here this evening, and so a lot of conversation, a lot of contemplation has already taken place prior to this meeting, and so I don't want the interpretation that because we didn't ask some probing questions in first round, it doesn't mean that we hadn't looked at each of the candidates. What I've asked the board clerk to do at this time is we are going to call by common roll call each of the board members that we would normally call in order for an action item, so that we can gain from them their top 3 candidates for moving to second round. And so with that, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Director Clark,
My selections are Roger Mitchell, Scott Bravo, and Jeffrey Stevens.
and Director Scheidegger.
Thank you. Excellent candidates, good presentations, tough decision. My 3 candidates are Scott Bravo, Jeff Stevens, and Mike Wilburn.
And Director Wood.
Thank you. My 3 are Roger Mitchell, Dave Pearson, and Michael Wilburn.
And Director Kelly.
I'd like to thank all the gentlemen for being interested in the position. I have Mr. Mitchell, Mr. Stevens, and Mr. Wilborn.
And Director Barnes.
Thank you. I too echo for the thought of thinking there was a fear of nobody putting in for it, and then to come up with the candidates and quality candidates that they did. Great job by all. No particular order, Mr. Michael Wilborn, Mr. Jeff Stevens, Mr. Roger Mitchell for me.
And Director Gould.
Thank you. I echo the sentiments. It's nice to see, even in an appointment, that we have such highly qualified candidates that put in their applications. That says a lot about the agency as well. The quality of the agency can glean such wonderful citizens in our community. My selection this evening for moving to second round is candidate Bravo, candidate Mitchell, and candidate Newcomer. So now what we'll do as a process is we will take a short recess, allowing our board clerk some higher math in order for us to then tally the votes. Thank you very much. We'll stand in recess. We're back from recess, only because I saw that our wonderful board clerk had already mentioned and said she was already ready. Is that in fact true? Okay.
Yes, I have the votes tallied.
Okay.
So the top 3 candidates with 5 votes, we have Mr. Roger Mitchell. We have a tie, Mr. Stevens and Mr. Wilborn, with 4 votes each for the second opportunity this evening.
Okay. So now we have our top 3 candidates that will be moving forward to the second round. I'd like to again thank everyone who put their time and effort into applying. We thank you very much, and we would encourage you to continue that in the future. At this time, what I'd like to do is take a true 5-minute recess so that the candidates moving to second round can gather their thoughts and ideas, and we can then come back into our meeting, at which time I remind my colleagues that we will call these candidates up in reverse alpha order by last name. And at that time, we begin a 10 to 15-minute conversation with extemporaneous questions from the board to the candidate. With that, again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time. We'll stand in recess.
So we're
All right, ladies and gentlemen, as I see one of our directors, Matt, are you going to leave us for a while, or? I'm like, where's he going? He's getting restless. All right. We'll go ahead and reconvene into open session. And at this time, I'd like to ask the board clerk to call our first second round candidate to the dais so that we can have an open dialogue with that candidate. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Wilborn is first this evening.
Okay, Mr. Wilborn, welcome and congratulations moving to this level. This will be a little different in the fact that it will be an open conversation between members of the board and yourself. And we will have a maximum of 15 minutes at this point. So with that, I'd like to ask my colleagues to begin asking any questions that they might have, and we'll move through this in a fairly fluid way as we move down this interview process. So with that, Director Clark, did you have a question?
Mr. Wilburn, welcome. Thank you for interviewing. What do you feel is the appropriate role of a member of the board of directors in a day-to-day operation of the fire district? Can you answer?
Well, hold on one second. Is he coming up on the? We want to make sure that the vast television audience hears you, and so just hold on one second. We're good? Okay. Thank you, sir. Go ahead now.
I think the role of the board is strategic in nature. At least, I think that's critical. You need to know, have a plan, prepare the plan, execute the plan, and communicate the plan to the people who report to the board. I think you have a responsibility for managing, monitoring the performance of the organization. Are you meeting? You've got an annual budget. Are you meeting your budget numbers? Are there any issues that are out there that you need to be concerned about? I know property taxes, I think, is revenue related to property taxes and that sort of thing is a big concern. Where are those headed? What's it look like going into future years? Making sure you have good people that you're working and developing through to come up through the ranks. I mean, that's a nutshell.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Director Shiger.
Thank you. Mr. Wilborn, thank you for being here, and congratulations on reaching this level. The competition was good. You talked about a little bit, and your resume talks about your experience in financing and the finances of organizations. Talk to us a little bit about your public experience in financing, particularly in terms of budget development and then budget monitoring, expenditure monitoring after that.
I was involved in each of the companies with whom I worked. I was involved in the evaluation of budgets that rolled up from various departments. In some cases, the budget's consolidated to an operating company, and then there was a second operating company. You roll those two together. Within the building of those budgets, what capital expenditures are we expecting? Are we going to approve? Is there going to be any asset allocation with respect to moving people around, changing out regional offices, moving business entities from point A to point B? In one case, do we divest ourselves of a company? But with respect, so you've got to build the budgets from the ground up, and then once you've got those budgets in place, then you hold people's feet to the fire. You hold them accountable for managing to that budget. And if you find that the budgets are not, you're not making your budget, then we start into what kind of damage control can we do? What do we need to repair this? And that sort of activity. Was that detailed enough, or?
Sure. I guess in particular, were any of those experiences that you had in the public sector at all?
No.
I think that
It's all private
the experience
sector.
you talked about are relevant.
It's all
in terms of
private
how you
sector.
build it and what you
Yeah.
consider. Okay, but it was private sector.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shadegger. Other members of the board, Director Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Every year, and it's a two-part question, so if I need to repeat, please ask me. Every year, public safety is scrutinized for the cost of employee overtime expenses, as opposed to hiring new employees. Have you ever had the experience in addressing this issue? And if not, how would you go about to the people you have to answer for, not only the staff here at Metro Fire, but also the people, your constituents in your district?
In a prior life, risk management and safety reported to me. So, you know, in a trucking operation, you've got nationwide situation, you've got accidents. Fatigue is a big deal. So if it's a question of working excess overtime that causes fatigue that leads to workers' comp or other kinds of safety issues, you've got to look at that. And if I'm not mistaken, you're all self-funded on workers' comp at up to some level. So that's money right out of your pocket. Training, you know, big deal. Training, safety training is critical, and so you've got to make sure your people are well trained. I don't know if that gives you a complete answer, or
It's good enough. Thank you.
Anything else?
Nothing
Director
from me,
Barnes,
sir.
relative to that? Okay. Other questions from members of the board for this particular candidate? Go ahead, Director Kelly.
Mr. Wilburn, again, thank you for being here. And as you may or may not know, Metro Fire is basically born out of many predecessor agencies. And I wondered if you had any opinion or concern about fire district consolidation. Certainly in this region, Sac Metro is the largest. Then you have City Fire, you have Fire down in Elk Grove, and you've got Folsom Fire. So there's a few different agencies around, and I just wondered if you had an opinion on the consolidation or not.
I don't have an opinion. I mean, I'd be willing to listen to all the facts related to both sides of the issue and make a determination. I have no opinion on that.
And if I could, one more, sir?
Oh, absolutely.
Do you have any close relatives or know anybody that's in the fire service?
My son is a firefighter.
Okay.
He was at station 62, and I think he's now in 68, the new station. So.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Director Kelly, Director Wood.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Wilburn, thanks again for your time and your interest in being here. Like you mentioned earlier, property taxes fund a significant part, in excess of 3/4 of our budget. We also get fund recovery from plan checks, fire inspections, medic transport. Some of these things get controversial. Do you have any thoughts or opinions on recovery through those avenues as well?
You know, I've had about 10 days to try to get on your website, take a look at the information that's there. I don't presume to know those sorts of details. I can tell you something that did stick out was where you guys bill for services and your accounts receivable just don't collect. It's, you know, it's some marginal number, and I don't know why that is. I don't know if it's because you get hit with discounts that you have to absorb or what, but it seemed like that was a big number to me. But you know, as I said, I've had a little over a week in which to try to get oriented in some of this stuff, and I'm a fast learner, but I'm not that fast.
Director Wood. anything else?
Thank you so much.
Okay, sir, I have a couple of questions for you, if you don't mind. First one I'd like to ask you is, what do you see are the fire district needs in Division 1 at this time?
I have, I actually visited two of the stations and was able to talk to some of the people. Two of the stations I tried to visit, they were out, so I'm a little limited. But I can only tell you what information I got from those people, and their concerns have to do with past wage increases. They're in with some of the having to support other stations. I think it's kind of if one station's out and another station has to go and fill temporarily. And then there was some talk about this brownout business. And, those are the conversations I had with employees, with firefighters. As I mentioned, I've had 1 week or a little over a week to deal with some of this stuff, and I'm a big believer in the comment that no matter how thin the batter, there's two sides to a pancake. But I'll listen to. I'm a listener, and so I'm fully prepared to sit down and to listen and evaluate and discuss stuff and see if I'm sure there's issues in that district that are not uncommon to the other districts, and so it'd be a work in progress for me.
Okay, thank you. And my second and final question is, Metro Fire offers an awful lot of services. What do you believe is the single greatest focus this agency should have?
I mean, short of taking care of the people, is that just a general question?
However you want to answer it, I'm just asking, what do you believe is the single greatest focus our agency should have?
I think service to the community, and I think that from what I hear, the Sac Metro is doing a terrific job at that. I mean, people rely on the fire stations for a lot of things. I mean, I hear things as ridiculous as get calls to set thermostats. I mean. But some of that's. I think that's a little bit weird, but I think that people look to you and to the fire team to be there for them. And to me, that's the critical thing. You've got to be prepared to be there when people need you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. All right. Any other questions from this body for this candidate? Anything else that you'd like to ask? Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate that. Okay. We'll now move on to our second candidate of three. Madam Clerk, who might that be?
The second candidate is Mr. Stevens.
Mr. Stevens, if you'll approach. Again, congratulations. You've now seen the process. We'll reset the clock for this candidate. Thank you very much. And we'll now move to about 15 minutes of open dialogue, as you've seen. And I'll start with my colleagues. Anyone want to ask this candidate questions? We'll start again. Questions for this candidate. Go ahead, Director Barnes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know you mentioned you retired. Congratulations on a successful retirement in the fire industry. Have you ever had the experience of dealing with grant funding? And if so, can you please expand on what that experience was?
I was a firefighter for my entire career, so I didn't get too involved. When I was with Real Into Fire, I did do some payroll and stuff like that, but grant funding, I don't have a lot of experience in that area, no.
Okay, thank you.
Director Barnes, any other questions for this candidate?
None, sir. Thank you very much.
All right, let's just keep moving on. I'll wait to get signals from my colleagues.
Oh, no.
Okay, Director Scheyer.
I'm going to ask you the same question. Tell us about your experience in budget preparation, budget development, and also, particularly in the public sector, and also adhering to that budget and making sure that expenditures are within line.
Well, I really think that, we have a great management team here, and they're going to lay the groundwork for what we need to look at. But as in, I was pretty much a meat and potatoes fireman the whole career, and I didn't do too much in budget. With the racing industry, I do budgets, but that's basically taking in contingency money and, just not spending the money that we don't have. That's the biggest thing.
Okay, thank you.
Jack, any other questions?
Nope, thank you.
Okay, we'll keep moving on. Any other questions? Go ahead, Director Kelly.
Certainly. Mr. Stevens, I would ask, you're probably very well aware, having seen a few districts consolidate. Do you have an opinion one way or another on consolidation of districts, and if so, why?
Well, I think anytime you can consolidate things, sometimes that is a good thing. You got to look at a lot of different things. Anytime you can, when you go to buy something, if you can team up with other agencies, you obviously get things cheaper. And it kind of works that way when you start consolidating. your overall costs or savings. I mean, I started with Rio Linda Fire, went to Rio Linda Alberta Fire, went to American River Fire, and then concluded my career with Sacramento Metro Fire. Anytime something gets bigger, sometimes it makes things easier. But, I mean, there's a lot of things to look at in consolidation. I think consolidation can be a good thing. It always is a good thing. But you have to look at all the different factors.
All right, thank you.
Director Kelly, any other questions for this candidate?
I know that he's very, very close to somebody that spent a lifetime in the fire industry, right?
Yeah. I've been in the fire service. My whole family's been in the fire service for quite a few years, and I think I covered that in my opening statement. But yeah, okay. I have a very soft spot for this organization, and that's really why I'm here today, is just to make sure things are in good hands and to come back and be a part of something that was such a big part of my life.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
I will ask that question that I asked the previous person that was up. What do you feel is the appropriate role of a member of the board of directors in the day-to-day operation of the fire district?
I think, first of all, you got to listen to the people in your district. You got to have an open mind. You got to be on a good page with your fellow board members. You got to trust the organization that you're working for. You got to believe in the organization. I think you're a very strong voice of the people that you're representing. And when people talk to you on the street, you got to talk to them in the best interest of the fire district, and I think that would be about it. I mean, you just got to do the best job you can, make the most fair decision, be loyal to the district you're working for, and do the best thing you can.
Mr. Clark, any other questions for this candidate? Okay, all right.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, you bet.
Mr. Stevens, thanks also for being here. Thank you for your interest. Sometimes getting involved in something that we have personal experience or history in can complicate our involvement. My wife hates watching legal shows with me because I'm always yelling at the TV about that's not right. That's not the way it really works. How difficult will it be for you to set aside your history and look at things from a fresh or a more contemporary perspective?
I don't think it'll be difficult at all. I had such a good experience with Metro Fire. I do know a lot of people in this organization, and I'm still friends with a lot of people in this organization. But I think that I keep a clear mind, and my number one priority would be to make the best decision for Metro Fire and the people that I support in District 1 that I possibly could. And I think I'm just a fair and honest individual, and that's what you're going to get with me.
Thank you very much.
Okay, any other questions from my colleagues? Okay, sir, I have a couple of questions. What do you believe is your greatest asset that you would bring to this board of pretty well qualified individuals?
I would say my best asset that I am very loyal. I am loyal to the district. I would be loyal to my fellow board members. Loyalty has been something from day one in the fire service that we've learned and we stay with. And when you believe in something, you're very loyal to it.
Okay, thank you. And my second question, similar to the other candidate, was we have a lot of services that we're providing as an all-risk agency. What do you believe should be our single greatest focus as board members?
Well, there's quite a few things, as long as, as well as public service, but public education is huge. Anytime you can educate the public on what the fire service is doing, they're going to understand more about the fire district, and it's going to make your job easier in the long run. We do have a level of service that we have to provide, and Metro Fire probably goes beyond supporting that level of service that a lot of fire districts do. So I would say maintaining the level of service that we have, but I would put public education quite high on educating the public and letting them know what the fire service is about, as well as I've noticed there's been a lot of open houses at fire districts, and you just got to, correspond with the public as much as you can.
Okay, thank you. And then one final question. Given your years of experience in the public arena, describe for me your strategy on how to handle a member of the public that is unhappy with decisions that you have made.
Well, that's a good one. You would talk to the individual and try to explain, your side of the story. There's going to be people sometimes that just not going to be happy no matter what, and you're going to have to be professional with that person and just try to explain to them that this is in the best interest of the public, this is in the best interest of them, and like I said, there's going to be some people that no matter what you do, they're not going to be happy, but you're just going to have to be as professional as you can and try to make it as easy as possible.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
All right, gentlemen, any other questions for this candidate relative to our second round question process? Hearing none and seeing none. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate that. Okay, Madam Clerk, our third and final member.
Mr. Mitchell?
Mr. Mitchell, if you'll come and approach the pulpit, please. Mr. Mitchell, as you've seen already now twice, the process that we're going through in second round. And we've already got the clock reset. I'm assuming that my colleagues are still aware of the process. No confusions there. Okay, then we'll move on for questions of this candidate. Questions we'll entertain. Anyone?
Yes.
Director Kelly.
Mr. Mitchell, I would like to ask you the same question that I've asked the other candidates, and I know that you are probably very well versed with consolidation. I will ask you the same questions that I asked the other candidates, and I'm quite certain that you are well versed with fire district consolidation. And please give me your opinion, whether or not it's a good thing, it's an evil, and any concerns you may have, and then explain those positions. Thank you.
First of all, I would answer that in a two-part answer, Director. One, is this a good thing? Simple answer, yes. We can all find areas that might be lacking in small amounts, but in the overall, I can tell you this. I sat on the board at the Rio Linda Alberta Fire District through a very contentious merger. And I would tell you this, the citizenry of District Number 1 in the Rio Linda Alberta area, which I represented, have far greater fire and EMS protection than they would have had under the previous district. Certainly not because that fire department and the people weren't capable. Mr. Jeff Stevens, who spoke before me, was a fireman there. And I would tell you this, that it was simply a matter of money. As you all know, money drives the wheels here. And no matter what we do, it boils down to the money. So yes, I think mergers are great. One area, when I say concern, it's not a concern, but I don't know how to correct it. And I would share this with you as a personal experience. I can remember laying in the bed in the dormitory. It's what I called Carmichael Number 1, which is now is 109. And when those districts weren't merged, when they all had their individual dispatch offices, when that hot phone rang, if you were laying in that bed, you heard the phone ring, you heard that distress call on the other end, help, help, my garage is on fire, and you were to the truck before you were even being dispatched. Now with a central dispatch, which it has to be that way, and I understand that, there's a little more delay in that just simply built into the system. If there's some way you could cut that time frame down, again, it takes money, and I understand that. That it's not a concern, but it's just an idea that if that could be done, it gives you a faster response. So hopefully I've answered what you'd like, Director Kelly.
You did very well. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Director Kelly, any other questions for this candidate?
Well, again, I know that you're very close to somebody in the fire service, and when I say that, I know yourself. So it's a rhetorical question with you, Mr. Mitchell.
You know, I would tell you this. My father was a firefighter. My two grandfathers were not in an organized group as you see here today, but were both, one was a volunteer firefighter for the Rock Island Arsenal, and another one for Davenport, Iowa, in the city courtyard. I grew up next to Mr. Jeff Stevens. His father and my father were volunteer firemen, stood in the back of the same trucks together. When the siren would blow or the plectron went off, you got off of the streets because Mr. Stevens' father and my father, that the public were in, shall we say, jeopardy with to get in the way of those vehicles. But yeah, I've grown up in the fire service. I know a lot of people, and it's in my family, just like in Jeff Stevens' family. So,
All right, thank you.
yes,
Thank you,
Director.
sir. Thank you, Director Kelly. Any other additional questions? Let's just keep moving on. Director Scheider.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to ask my same question, Mr. Mitchell. Could you describe your experience in public finance, particularly in the development of budgeting and the ensuing monitoring and assuring adherence to that budget?
Well, first of all, let me give you my theory on budgeting, and then I'll step back to my theory on budgeting is very simple. I'm a line item budget person. I like line item budgets. It makes it easy to move things around, find when things aren't working, and to be able to correct that. My first experience in budgeting was at the Carmichael Fire District. Each one of us were responsible for small areas, and you had a responsibility to come up with a certain amount of money for a certain amount of things you were responsible for. As the districts merged into American River, I was on the apparatus committee. I'm proud to say that I took the input from that committee and I wrote the first specifications for what you now see as your four-door cabs. Before that, we didn't have them. And I was responsible for budgeting for that, telling the administration what it was going to cost, the advantages, disadvantages of that. I wrote the specifications for your first tiller truck. It's now in reserve. LTI was responsible for the budgeting of that and back to the administration on that. So now, since I've retired, in a smaller way, I'm responsible for the budgeting and the managing of money for a very small restoration. Now, so that's small in the $180 million budget that you gentlemen look at, but nevertheless, it's a responsibility. And I look back on one of my management classes that simply said this: it does not matter what the one is. It's the number, the amount of zeros behind that one. So as long as you can manage the one, it's the same for the number of zeros. So whether I'm managing $75,000 on a smaller project today or managing or assistant managing a $180 million budget, I think I'm well qualified.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, we'll continue. Director Clark.
Mr. Mitchell, thank you once again. I kind of want to ask you kind of the same question that I've asked the previous candidates. As you know, this district, we have to deal with the union and our employees and all that. How would you, what's your opinion about that? I mean, how would you feel you would get along or deal with?
Full disclosure to this board, I'm a retired fire captain, but I'm also a retired member and a present member of Local 522. It's important for you to know that about me.
Okay.
Secondly, when you sit on that dais up there, you have to put those aside. You are making decisions based on the public need of this district, number one. But you're also making assessments and decisions based on the needs of your employees. And that is a balancing act, a very delicate balancing act. And when it comes to the point that you have to make a decision that, let's say that, if you will, maybe the union's not too happy with, but it's for the betterment of the district, and even as a director you might think is the betterment for your employees, then that's a decision you have to make and be willing, if criticizing come, to accept that and then try to explain that to the people that will listen. As Mr. Stevens said, sometimes there's people that just won't listen, and you have to be able to agree to disagree in a professional manner. So hopefully that answers your question, Director.
Great answer. Thank you.
Okay, we'll continue. Director Wood.
Mr. Mitchell, your answer actually anticipated to some degree my question. the depth of your commitment and your passion for your community can't be overstated, and it's an admirable trait. The decisions we have to make, though, sometimes, as I know all too well, aren't always what's necessarily best for our division. I would have liked to have had 68 open 2 years ago, but that wasn't a decision that we could have made at those times. So how are you going to be able to, or will you be able to separate the decisions you want for your boundaries versus the decisions we have to make for 750 square miles?
I think, first of all, when you make
It's really big. I think it's like 450.
Oh.
Trying to consolidate on his own.
I'm expanding already,
Yeah.
so my apologies.
People in Galt are freaking out.
no apologies necessary. I think, first of all, when you sat at the dais, foremost, you are directors of this district. Yes, you represent individual districts, but your decisions have to be made what's best for this district as a whole. Again, I have empathy for you, Director, with having a station closed. That's not a pleasant thing. I would share with you my personal thoughts on that, and that even though it's the money that drives the machine, I feel I would rather have more stations than we presently have. There's nothing wrong when, if you look at what the NFPA standards on, having greater standards than what they require. That depends on the budget and the money you have available. I would be a director that would be, whichever district there's a station closed in, or an engine company closed, or a truck company closed, one of my highest priorities would be to have that opened to the public. I think that's necessary. And I would even take that a step farther. Again, full disclosure, I'm a union member. No trying to hide this. I think it's time that us, not only in Sac Metro Fire, but in any county, if you will, district, if we look at our brothers across in Sacramento City, they have 4-man engine companies. You know? When the money's available, along with, if that's what the administration wants, that's what we need. These gentlemen sitting right in this room will tell you the benefit of that. It's not only a benefit to the taxpayer, it's a benefit to these people's safety, which adds to a greater benefit to the taxpayers. So it's not only the stations, it's not only the equipment, it's the manpower. And I look at that all together, but I think when you set up at that dais, you're making a decision that will be for the betterment of this entire district. Thank you, Director.
Thank you.
Okay, Director Barnes, we have you going last. Do you have anything that you'd like to ask this candidate?
I actually have nothing. I know you've been here at many meetings, and we understand the passion you have for this district and this department, so I have nothing. I think you've answered quite a bit here tonight.
Thank you, Director Barnes.
Okay. Mr. Mitchell, I have a couple of questions for you.
Yes, sir.
The first one, probably the most important question I could ever ask, is what do you believe is the single greatest asset of this organization?
Your manpower. Plain and simple.
Okay.
Because without them, you have nothing.
Okay, thank you very much. The second question is, how would you describe your strategy for making very difficult and politically charged decisions?
Let me tell you what I had to do, and that would be what I would do today. When I was a director in Rio Linda, Alberta, had a very politically charged decision to make on the consolidation. I can tell you I've been a board member that has been given a recall notice because I was in favor of a merger. And I made that tough decision even after that was done. And today, that merger took place in 1990, and it's still the best decision I ever made. Not just for the people of the Rio Linda, Alberta Fire District, but for the citizenry at large. And I can tell you that I went through every merger that led to American River, and I retired about 6 months before the merger between American River and Metro Fire. But that being said, sure, I'm sure if the men and women that are sitting here this evening would be honest with you, when they went through a merger, there was a few things that they didn't like, and I can tell you there was a few things I didn't like. But on the whole, the taxpayers of the area that this district represents is far better off with this merger than they ever were individually.
Okay, thank you. One final question. What do you see as being some of the most fundamental needs that Division I has today that can be addressed by this board?
This board can address one thing that I'm thinking of most assuredly, but again, it takes money, and I understand that. But our district, District 1, has one station that is basically a house trailer. And I see that as whenever this district has the money to build what I'm going to call an appropriate station, I think that needs to be done. And the location might even need to be changed. But that's an important factor because of just the difference in the stations and the way the men and women have to have their living quarters. So,
okay. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Thank you
can I
very
make
much.
a closing statement, Director?
Well, we haven't had closing statements of any other candidates, so I'm going to ask you to hold on
Yes,
that
sir.
if you wouldn't
Be happy
mind.
to. Be happy to.
I'm also going to ask if my colleagues have any other questions for this particular candidate. We still have 30 seconds left. Anything from any of you? Okay, with that, we're going to go ahead, and as I mentioned in the beginning, we're going to go ahead and end the second phase of this process, and we are going to take a short recess to allow my colleagues to do some bio issues if they need to, and then when we come back, we will reconvene this meeting, and then I will call for the proposal or the motion for a candidate to be selected. So with that, let's take about a 3 or 4 minute break, and then we'll reconvene.
We're supposed to write a biography? Is that what you said?
Yeah, something about your biology.
Oh, biology. Oh, you said bio. I'm with you.
I was thinking about.
All right, ladies and gentlemen.
I think it'd be fun. I'm glad they'd be Pittsburgh.
Yeah, they suffer it all.
I know we're taking in several breaks this evening. That's to allow the board members to contemplate and think about what we've been hearing this evening. We're now in open session, and I would, at this stage of the process, I would call for a nomination from the party of 3 candidates that we have. And understand this, that once we have a nomination, we'll also call for a second. Once a first and a second have been presented, we will call the roll. If that individual receives 5 votes from this body, that individual will be then sworn in a few minutes. And so at this time, I would like to ask my colleagues for a nomination to serve in the vacancy of Division 1 of the Sacramento Metropolitan Fire District's Board of Directors. Director Wood.
Mr. Chair, I'd nominate Roger Mitchell for the Division 1 vacancy.
I have a nomination of Mr. Roger Mitchell, and I have a second on the table. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Director Clark? Aye. Scheidegger?
Abstain?
Wood?
Aye.
Kelly?
Aye.
Barnes?
Aye.
And Gould?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you very much. Congratulations to Mr. Mitchell. There he is over there. I couldn't see him. Thank you very much. And I'd like to also thank the other candidates that made it to the second round. Thank you for your time and your talents, and we look forward to seeing you again in the future. At this time, what we will do is take a very brief recess. There's some processes that we need to describe for the newly identified candidate. We'll move forward with that. So at this time, we'll take approximately a 5-minute recess. Thank you very much.
come up here and sit here with the woods to get lost.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and open the session back up, and our board clerk will issue the oath of office to our newest director.
I'd like to invite Roger Mitchell up for the oath. And if you could please raise your right hand. I state your name, do solemnly swear
I, Roger Mitchell, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
that I will bear true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully
that I will well and faithfully
discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
that I will discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
Congratulations.
Okay, congratulations, Director Mitchell. Now going to have Director Mitchell make some comments now from the dais. Director Mitchell.
Board Chairman Gould, board members, Chief Wells, staff, and members of Metro Fire. First of all, thank you for your confidence in me in this job. I will endeavor to do my best. I've been lucky enough to spend a year in a, shall we say, a troubled board before. So I do have some experience, but I will have to lean on all of you for your help and guidance through this new endeavor of mine. So I thank you very much, and I ask for all of your help and support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir. We appreciate it. We'll now continue with our regularly scheduled agenda that we have on our evening this evening, and it starts with the President's report, of which I have none except to congratulate our newest director on the board. We'll now move to Fire Chief's report.
Well, good evening, directors, and welcome, Director. Very nice to see you on the board, and we're looking forward to working very collaboratively with you. I only have a few things tonight because I knew it would be a long meeting, but certainly a couple high-profile issues. We had a cancer awareness engine ceremony and a press conference that I know was well attended, and I can tell you a very powerful moment. That was last week, and at 11 o'clock. It was last September 30th, last Wednesday. And now we have the pink engine out, and it's out in the community, and it is a powerful message about what we stand for and stomping out cancers for all people. And so the good news about that will be that it'll be attending the board meeting, next board meeting in these chambers. Actually, we won't bring it up the stairs, but it'll be outside on the 22nd of October, and the board of directors will get the opportunity to go out and see that. And I strongly support the community to come out and see it at that time as well. And it will be traveling throughout the district. I announced those dates last week on the air, but it'll go from 61, 53, 109, and 24 respectively into the next 2 months. So we're excited about that. Had the great opportunity to reopen Station 68 last Saturday, and that was a a long time in coming, 4 years that fire station has not been opened. And clearly, as I've represented in front of this board before, the call volume and the population is demanding of a fire station out there, and we're very pleased to reopen that station. On the tour, I'd like to thank the staff of Metro Fire that put that together, and it was a nice event, and we had a lot of the community come out and celebrate the reopening of the fire station, tour the facility, which was great. We taught hands-only CPR. We had firefighter demonstrations with their turnout gear to the kids and taught some safety tips to the community out there. And I'd like to especially thank Metro Fire Board of Director Ted Wood. Thank you very much for being there. Congressman Ami Bera was there. From Assemblyman Ken Cooley's office, District Director Marianne Conero was there, and it was nice to see her. Supervisor Don Natoli, Rancho Cordova Interim City Manager Cyrus Abar, and Rancho Cordova City Council Member Don Terry. And it was very well represented. We were very excited about the amount of support we got from our electeds and locally and otherwise, and of course our good friend out there in the community our good friends out there in the Anatolia community that have stuck with us, and we appreciated that. So also today, another very exciting day for us was we had an open house at Station 101 up there on Fulton Avenue. And a number of good events have happened over there, station remodeling, the crews, and Chief Daniels and his group have done a lot to bring that station up. Captain Andy Whaley and his crew and all the crews that work there at the fire station have put a lot of their own effort, and it was a great event. We had a lot of retirees that showed up. A lot. It was very well attended, and a lot of Metro Fire active members were there. And really the reason why we did it today was it was in honor of moving Jim Saunders' turnouts that have been so proudly displayed, but in a somber way, of course, here in our lobby. And yesterday was the anniversary 5 years ago that Jim succumbed on an injury that he sustained, basically a heart attack on a wildland fire in the Hagen, let's see, up there in the Hagen Oaks area, where he was fighting a grass fire afterwards, succumbed to a heart attack and later died. But I will tell you that Jim, being Jim, he donated his organs and saved 3 other lives to full value based on his sacrifice. And so that's basically who he was, is he treated people like family when he was out there treating them in their homes. And of course, even in death, he shared of himself with others. So we were excited to be able to honor him today and bring his turnouts over. And now they are very fittedly hung in the display in the front office of that fire station, and they'll be there forever. And Jim is home back in a fire station where he belongs, and so our turnouts are. So we appreciate that. And so, if you have any further questions, I would be glad to answer those. But that concludes my report this evening.
Okay, thank you. And I see that Director Wood has a question.
Chief, on the pink engine here next week, we got a message. And I know I did, and I think some of the others bought pink T-shirts as well for the picture. Are we wearing those to the meeting next meeting? Because I don't want to be the only one here in jeans and a T-shirt while everyone else has got their ties on.
Yes, do it.
It's always
Yes, please wear the T-shirt.
And I don't want to be the only one in a tie if everyone else has got pink.
Ted, I'll join you.
After being on the fire service for 28 and some change, I always have a throwdown plan just in case you're the. But no, I believe that's the plan.
Yes, please wear your shirts. And if you did not purchase a shirt, then I would suggest wearing something pink in honor.
Did you hear that, Director Barnes?
I did.
Anything pink you got?
You got it. I got a whole wardrobe.
Not even going there. But thanks for the setup.
Too late to purchase a shirt. Never too late.
I will check with the people that have organized the shirts and see where they're at with things.
Okay, Chief, that
concludes
your
my
report.
Thank you.
All right, we will be headed into closed session here this evening. What I'd like to do is, as you'll notice on this special agenda, we don't have any questions or comments from the board members. I think that's a a plus after tonight's, all of the activity this evening. But I do want to make you aware that our next regularly scheduled board meeting is October 22nd, 2015, at 6 o'clock in these chambers. So with this, we will go into closed session, and of course, when we come out, we expect to see no one in the room now that it's time to be home and have dinner with your family. So with that, we'll go into closed session. Thank you very much for being here this evening. Bye-bye.